Okay, and so with that said, we will move on to my session, which is planning your finances, managing your risks and being able to grow confidently through managing your finances. And what that actually means and what we'll be learning today is why having cash is important. It's a deeper answer than you probably think. And after we cover that, we'll be talking about how you can keep more cash in your hands to help mitigate risks, business risks specifically. We'll be talking about how to create cash flow forecasts, or why you should be creating cash flow forecasts. We'll talk a little bit about how you can manage your cash inflows as well as your cash outflows. And we'll talk about stress testing and what ifs, and how they can actually help you, again, manage and mitigate your risks as an agency. So that being said, I'll share a little bit about myself. I founded a business consulting firm here in Calgary, Canada in 2014. We really focus on fractional controllership and fractional CFO services. That's just a really fancy way of saying we like to help people with advisory work. So creating budgets, forecasts, helping them find financing, really strategize around how they can grow their businesses. So in doing that for the past 8 years, we've gained a lot of experience in helping small businesses. That's our focus. What we really realized is that cash flow is probably one of the most important pieces for any business, whether we can do a 5-year strategic plan for someone or help them implement new processes or accounting systems. One of the key questions that always comes up in any work that we do is, can you please help me manage or plan out my cash flow? I really need to know how I can afford these bills in the future and essentially make things work. And so what we found in our practice is that doing that in spreadsheets was extremely difficult. That's why we ultimately built our own app to solve that problem. And that app is called Helm. We won't be talking a ton about that today, but that is what we do. That's what I'm all about. Essentially, Helm helps you deliver and get cash flow insights quickly and easily with a lot more impact. So that's enough about me and kind of what I'm all about. Let's hop right into the learning. To start out, I wanted to kind of point out that there's really 2 key issues for all businesses out there. If they don't have these 2 key things, they don't really have a chance to survive, let alone grow or optimize their profitability. In my opinion, those 2 key issues are, number 1, getting customers coming in the door, and number 2, having cash available to do things. So again, based off the agenda, we've got Christian will be talking about how to get more higher value customers in. So that'll be covered off, and Marcel's going to touch on ways that you can improve profitability. So these 2 talks in of themselves will help you get really far along in addressing these 2 key issues of every business. But with that said, I think there's still a lot to be talked about when it comes to the proverbial cash in the till. You probably heard the saying before, cash is the lifeblood of every business, but why is that? The concept of having a lot of cash is simple enough. The more you have of it, the better off you will be. But if you really dive into why having cash is important, you'll actually realize that it's the ultimate opportunity maker. It allows you to take risks that you might not otherwise have been able to afford to take. And it provides a lot of emotional benefit to you, your management team, and your employees. With the right amount of cash on hand, you can pursue business growth more quickly. You can look at acquisition opportunities. You can take on large projects without worrying about carrying costs. You can start up new service lines without worrying about initial sales. Basically, cash is the great enabler. It allows you to sleep at night because you're not worried about where your business is at, and it allows you to run your business with ultimate confidence. And that's ultimately what we're trying to talk about today. So now, of course, all of that seemed probably really obvious. Of course, having lots of cash would make you feel better, allow you to take more risks and pursue different ideas or clients. And it's a simple concept, but don't discount exactly how important it is. I've had real world clients who have become trapped, both emotionally, from a lack of cash. And I'll walk through a real world example here. One client was a rental business. They were doing extremely well prior to COVID. They had great margins, they had great recurring revenue, they had great cash flow. It was really good business. When COVID hit, just like it did for a lot of other businesses, all of that changed. Revenue dried up, costs largely stayed the same, and cash flow went negative because of that quite quickly. and for a number of years. Like a lot of business owners this particular client had to layer their business in debt in order to cover off the cash gaps that they had. Now, that in of itself actually wasn't the issue for this business. Once COVID restrictions were lifted, sales came back, albeit slower than they were before, but at least at a point where the business was sustainable on a day-to-day basis. But most of their dollars were having to be put back into debt repayments that they had put on since the COVID restrictions were lifted. And this unfortunately forced them to have extremely hard talks with their lenders, for years in a row. It forced them to have extremely hard talks with their landlords all the time, forced them to have extremely hard talks with a lot of their staffs and suppliers. They just didn't have enough cash to make all ends meet all the time, and it forced them to make a lot of really hard decisions continually. This created a lot of emotional weight on the business owner, and it's been extremely hard for them to shake even to this day. And we are not necessarily out of COVID per se, but we're definitely here in Alberta, Canada. We are a year or more away from when restrictions were lifted, so it's been a lot of time. So it's almost like a form of PTSD, in my opinion. This business owner is continually living in fear of the next shoe dropping, feeling like they're trapped by their own creation, something that they used to love, and they're acting in ways that are very different from they were pre-COVID. It's a very different person and a very different personality. The continual lack of cash hasn't just stripped them of their ability to take opportunities in a money sense. It's actually pushed them into a position of making continual fear-based decisions. These are typically rooted with the near term in mind and are emotionally charged, which means that their growth is actually greatly stunted by their actions because they're not actually making proper logical business decisions. So again, don't discount how important lots of cash is. It's a nasty, vicious mental cycle that can be created by having a lack of cash. Now, I'm sure a lot of people out there can hopefully or maybe relate to that story. There could be pieces in there that hit home with your own situation, or maybe of somebody in a similar position. But the point is if you want to grow your business and really manage your risks, having the right state of mind is key to that growth, and having the right mentality and having cash available really puts you in that right state of mind so that you can properly manage your business with actual logic and rooted in great business backing. So the obvious question that comes from that then is, how do you keep more cash or get more cash? So then you have to go back to cash is generated from having clients that are consistently profitable. So again, based off the agenda and other speakers in this bootcamp, the advice that they're going to give is going to greatly help in those areas. So definitely watch some of those other sessions. But having cash just isn't a case of profitability. It's also a case of timing and management. Example, if you give your customers credit, allowing them to pay after you provide your services, your cash flow is not going to equal your profit. If you pay some of your contractors and suppliers after they provide you with services, your cash flow is not going to equal your profit. And if you and your team use credit cards, personally or otherwise, to pay for things that you need to complete your work or your services, your cash flow is not going to equal your profit, because the real hit here to your cash flow is when your credit card actually gets paid. So first things first, in order to keep more cash in hand, you as a business owner or an advisor to the business owner really need to get a handle on the actual cash flow of the business. You need to learn the ins and outs, the ebbs and flows, and how the lifeblood of cash actually flows through the agency. So how do you truly learn the actual cash flow of your business? So it's probably going to be a little bit of a tangent here, but first you need to make sure you are working off a clean set of books. That means that you have up-to-date records, all of your bank accounts are reconciled, and all of your billing is in the system. Having a clean set of books is paramount to understanding your financial position. If you're working on out-of-date or incorrect information, your perception of where your financial position is at will be incorrect as well. So this is just kind of a word of caution. Don't be afraid to invest in quality bookkeeping to get a clean set of books. It's very easy to price shop in this area, whether you're hiring someone internally or whether you are outsourcing to a professional bookkeeping or accounting firm. Bookkeeping is becoming a highly commoditized service area though. And so those that are offering low prices in these areas or are looking for low wages might be lacking some of the skills you need to properly run the financial side of your business. Just given my background and what we do with our consulting firm, bookkeeping and consulting firm, I've hired and outsourced a number of different bookkeepers in my lifetime. So speaking from experience, those that are really good definitely know their worth, especially in today's day and age. So that all said, with a quality bookkeeper in place, the easiest way to learn your cash flow is to quickly talk to that person. You can ask them questions like, when is payroll run and when does it actually run through your bank account? You can ask them who your best paying clients are and who some of the worst ones are in terms of timing, not just amount. You can ask them which suppliers have the worst payment terms for you. You know, maybe they're too short, or maybe they have, you know, upfront costs that you just can't handle. And it's also good to maybe ask your bookkeeper about who out of your suppliers complains the most. You can also ask them what your biggest recurring cash expenses are in the business and when they actually roll through your bank account. So the bookkeepers are a wealth of information because they're in it, working on your books on a day-to-day basis and a consistent basis. They have an intimate understanding of how cash moves through your business. And so gleaning that information from them will obviously help you to get context for what's going to then happen in the future. Now, of course, I'm going to qualify this. I'm assuming that the people watching this session are not actually doing their own books right now. But of course, depending on where you are in your business growth cycle or who you are, it could very well be that you're doing your own bookkeeping. And if you are, you'll be keenly aware of everything that I just talked about, all of the ins and outs. And this is a plus. You actually have an advantage over other business owners in terms of the intimate knowledge you have around your own cash flow. Now, this is a plus, but it's also a minus. The disadvantage is that if you're an agency firm owner, your bookkeeping and accounting is probably not your forte or your, desired place to be sitting. So the disadvantage is that your skill sets are better served in other areas of the business, like business development, sales, or strategy. So from a growth perspective, try to look for bookkeeping and put the bookkeeping in someone else's capable hands sooner rather than later, as soon as is realistically possible. So once you have a good concept of how cash has flowed through your business in terms of the past, you can create a picture of what that will look like in the future. Knowing when payroll clears the bank in the past, you can then extrapolate that into the future. Knowing who your worst paying clients are in terms of outstanding amounts means that you can then kind of estimate and make assumptions about when they are going to pay you in the future. Knowing your supplier and contractor terms means you can then map that out and pay them when their bills are due. And knowing when your recurring expenses are occurring and when those credit card bills hit means that you can lay them out into a pretty succinct financial plan. And of course, putting all of these things together creates a roadmap of where your business is heading on a cash basis over the next few months with pretty high accuracy. And this is a cash flow forecast. And it's extremely important to have to make confident business decisions. Of course, you can extend a cash flow forecast for up to 12 months to get a longer term trend. And while I fundamentally believe in strategizing and having a financial plan beyond this time frame, having detailed cash plans beyond 12 months, in my opinion, is actually a bit futile. Your business will change course many times within that 12-month time frame. And so those longer term detailed cash flow forecasts largely become inaccurate. That's why a lot of people refer to cash flow forecasting process as a rolling forecast, because whenever you update them, you are continually looking out from today to a defined short-term period into the future. And sometimes those can be 13 weeks, sometimes they're 52, but they typically don't go beyond that. Those are different kinds of financial models. If what I just described to you seems like a lot of work to put the forecast data together, it is. that's what I was describing to you when I was talking about myself. That's exactly why we built Helm, as it does this whole process for you. It'll connect to your accounting systems and create cash flow forecasts for you based off your historical data. This isn't a sales pitch at all, but if anyone's interested in learning more about Helm, please throw a comment in the chat and we can reach out to you with further information today or at some point in the future. So that all said, why is having a cash flow forecast so important? Basically because with it, you'll be able to see if you have problems with your cash inflows, your invoicing, or your collection processes. You'll be able to see exactly who you should be paying and when, based off their terms, their due dates. You'll be able to see exactly how your future business plans will be affecting your bank balance. Knowing all of this in advance means that you can proactively make plans to get around any issues that might come up and that you might not have thought about if you weren't actually creating a cash flow forecast. So having a cash flow forecast is obviously one of the biggest steps in financial planning to help you avoid and mitigate risks. It helps give you the clear line of sight on where your business is going. And this is something that I hear a lot of business owners saying they wish they had it. That being said, having control around your cash inflows, your sales invoices, and how you collect them is also important though. Why? Because at a very basic level, what good is it working for someone that's not going to pay you? And of course, I appreciate that some of you are probably going to be chuckling at that, much like I just did. But it's very true. It's very common for me to hear from business owners out there. I do X dollars in sales and Y dollars in profit, but I don't really have any money in my bank account. Again, going back to past experiences that I've had in past days as bookkeeper and consulting Kelvin. One client in particular earned $300,000 one year in net income, but a large portion of his sales were with one big customer. And that customer would consistently overhold payment of past work in order to get prioritized for future new work. And my client was always wondering why they were consistently close to the pin in terms of cash flow. And it was because this one amount, this one customer overheld nearly an amount equal to what this business was generating in net profit on an ongoing basis. And so this business was actually effectively working for free because of how they were managing their cash inflows. A terrible situation for sure. So how do you avoid situations like that? There's some pretty basic concepts that you should follow just for best practices. Implementing electronic invoicing and payment solutions is definitely key. Try to do that where you can. This eliminates the friction from customers trying to pay you and greatly speeds up the collection process. But even more important to things like implementing electronic systems or online systems is actually invoicing on time. More often than not, I see businesses being slow on their actual invoicing because they're just simply too busy doing actual work. So a real key to managing your cash inflows is to make sure your sales billing process is a priority, because it definitely kicks off the entire cash flow process. And it's the most important one because it kicks off the process of cash coming into your business. That all said, you should monitor any old amounts that are outstanding as well. So knowing what is still owed to you, how long it has been outstanding, and even how it fits within past customer payment behavior is extremely helpful. Sending out simple reminders along with, again, electronic payment links can be highly effective to collect this cash. And of course, if you have any customers that are very delinquent in payment, you should have some form of credit risk system in there where you're flagging these clients, these problem clients, and reconsidering any potential future work with them. Knowing what turning down this future work will do to your cash flow is also definitely important to properly manage your risks, which of course comes back to the cash flow forecast where you can model that and see exactly what's going to happen. So doing all of this is obviously easier said than done. Usually a bunch of different reports are pulled from your accounting system to look at all of this stuff. But even doing this, some of those reports won't tell you how long it took customers to pay in the past, and they certainly won't tell you future-looking information, which is how are these customers probably going to pay you in the future. And again, it's another reason that we built out Helm, is to have all of this information in a single spot, a single place that you can go to, look at, and have it as your source of truth. So let's move on to another important area, cash outflows. Managing what you spend is a bit more straightforward than managing what you receive, simply because to a large degree you have control over your own spending. But that being said, a number of small businesses don't fully plan for their spending and instead just assume that whatever is in their bank account is enough for the short term. This can be problematic for scaling businesses as expenses are continually growing and expanding in line with the company's growth, and cash reserves are usually pretty limited because of that. This means that there's a real possibility that spending could actually outstrip cash available in these kinds of businesses, these growth businesses. And statistics would actually show that this is a real problem. If you actually look at the failure rates of businesses, over 60% of all businesses that fail are actually profitable. So it's a real thing. You can actually spend yourself into oblivion. So how do you properly manage your spending? By using the cash flow forecast that we were talking about before to see where your business is headed for sure. This forecast contains all of the information you need to be confident that you won't be overspending in the near term. You just need to be sure that your spending at any given point in time doesn't push your future bank balance to a zero position, assuming that you're cash-based and don't have a line of credit, obviously. That being said, in addition to watching your spending relative to your future cash position, it's also good practice to monitor your payables, very similar to how you would with receivables, the way that we just discussed. This means checking for outstanding amounts and keeping track of various due dates that are coming up, ensuring that your bills are paid on time, and keeping your suppliers happy and making them saving you any interest and penalties that you might incur from late payments. So we've covered how using cash flow forecasts can help you plan around future issues. And we've also quickly talked about how managing cash flow, how to manage cash inflows and cash outflows. And how implementing all of these methods and strategies can reduce your risks that your business will face in the future. There's another very useful tool though when it comes to managing business risks, and they're kind of the same. There's two of them. They're kind of the same but slightly different, and that is stress testing and using what if scenarios when you're forecasting and doing your future planning. At a basic level, stress testing is taking your base level expectations for your business, that initial cash flow forecast that you created, and seeing what happens when really adverse events occur. So this is extremely useful in cash flow forecasting, as it can give you a lot of insight into what kind of cash reserves you should have on hand to weather these really adverse events. Imagine a situation, as an example, where you have a really large customer payment outstanding. Knowing exactly how much money you need to keep in the bank to still meet your short-term spending requirements, if this payment doesn't come through, would be extremely useful from a business owner standpoint. That person can then plan their operations appropriately and with extreme confidence, knowing that their actual day-to-day operations wouldn't be interrupted, even though this payment didn't arrive on time or at all. And so that is stress testing. It's taking a really extreme event, modeling it out on your cash flow forecast and seeing what it would take for your business to survive during that situation. What if scenarios are similar to stress testing in that they compare, again, that base level expectation, that initial cash flow forecast, with something else. Comparing your current business trajectory to situations like, what if we got a big new client? What costs would we need to incur in that situation? And what impact would that have on our business and our cash position? What if we hired a new employee? What would that cost look like on our future bank balance? What if we rented new office space? What if we purchased fancy new equipment to help our business kind of grow and thrive? In each of these cases, what if scenario would show how your bank account would be impacted by the various business decisions. This would help guide you in terms of the timing of the decision, the size of the decision, how much you're going to spend on new people or new growth or ads, whatever that might be. And it might even give you a little context on if you should even be carrying out the decision at all. It could be the case that you run through that what if scenario and maybe that decision has a lot of consequences you weren't actually thinking about, and now you just don't want to do it. So stress testing and what if scenarios are highly similar, where stress testing is more focused on negative events occurring, but both of them are extremely important. Now, traditionally, stress testing and what if planning is done in spreadsheets by creating a forecast, then copying your data to a new tab, changing some of your forecast numbers, and then creating a graph, essentially comparing your original spreadsheet data to this new set of information. And while not extremely onerous, this process could easily take 10 to 15 minutes to do, maybe more, depending on how complex your spreadsheet was. This then makes running the analysis a little more painful than maybe it could be, which is why a number of businesses don't do it as often or as much as they should. And again, this is another reason why we built Helm, because it allows you to do this stress testing and this what if analysis extremely quickly, so you can focus on the decision making in your business. So that's it. To recap, we've learned about why having cash is important for a number of reasons. It weighs greatly on emotions, and it is also excuse me, a great enabler. We also learned how you can keep more cash in your hands by creating cash flow forecasts and managing your cash inflows and outflows, and by performing stress tests and what ifs. There's a lot more that we could cover in these topics. We could definitely get a lot more in depth of them, but that would take hours and hours of time. And I do want to be respectful of your time this morning, as well as for the other panelists, and give people kind of a break in between sessions. So with that, I was kind of allocating around 10 to 15 minutes of open Q&A. And so we will move it to that. If anybody has any questions, please let me know. And I will actually open up the Q&A so I can see it. Nope, no questions. If there aren't any questions, if you do have questions, please feel free to put them either in the chat or in the Q&A. But if not, that's actually the end of my session. And so there is another link for Sharon's coming up in about 30 minutes. So please feel free to hop off this session and just join up to that next one on the top of the hour. And so thanks everybody for attending this session, and look forward to seeing you in other people's sessions here.